Good morning. Today I have the pleasure to interview Professor Paola Gaeta. Professor Gaeta is a professor of the International Law Department of the Geneva Graduate Institute. She teaches the core course of International Criminal Law of the LLM program at the Geneva Academy. And she was also the director of the LLM program from 2007 to 2014. And the co-director of the Geneva Academy from 2011 to 2014, together with Professor Clapham. Professor Gaeta, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Agustina, for inviting me. Thank you.
Today we will speak about your research project, which is entitled Lethal Autonomous Weapons and War Crimes, which is funded by the Swiss National Science Foundation. This project is now coming to an end, and the results will be soon published as a special issue of the Journal of International Criminal Justice. The first thing I want to ask you is what an autonomous weapon system is. Do you have some examples for us?
Yes, it's difficult to provide for a definition of what an autonomous weapon system is because there is no agreement on what makes a weapon system autonomous. The most acceptable or widespread definition is that autonomous means autonomy in the crucial functions of targeting, namely selecting and engaging with a target, independently of a human operator. This is why autonomous lies in a way. As examples, for the moment, there is a variety of semi-autonomous weapon systems that are in use in the military of many states. Often they have a defensive function, so they will work to defend the relevant state from incoming attacks. But there are also offensive autonomous weapon system. The best examples I can give is that of the loitering munition that can fly once they have been engaged. They can fly for a given number of hours, sometimes up to 9 hours in a particular area, with the task of identifying and firing a particular target, and usually is an object because they have an anti-radar, for instance, a function. So in this case, we have a best example of what an autonomous weapon system is. There are rumors that the same technology is going to be developed not to select and fire autonomously an object by a human being.
Could you provide now us with an overview of their project? What is the research objective and why this topic?
Well, the topic came a bit naturally because since I deal with international criminal law, I'm very much into the question of responsibility and individual criminal responsibility for violations of international humanitarian law and also for other kind of international crimes such as crimes against humanity and so on and so forth. So in the field of war crimes, there has been a campaign that has been launched by a group of NGOs, Stop Killer Robots, and this campaign has put forward the need to discuss the problem of the so-called accountability gap when such autonomous weapons, when they will become fully autonomous, namely that they can operate without a human operator at all once they are released. So it's the so-called fire and forget. Then they can work autonomously, in particular if they are enabled by artificial intelligence. Then the problem would be of who is responsible for any violation of international humanitarian law that has been committed by this full autonomous weapon on the battlefield and contrary to international humanitarian law. Could you then attribute the act to a human being, although the human being was not controlling the activity of the weapon? Could you say that the human operator who has decided to engage the autonomous weapon had any mental element, a guilty mind to commit the violation, and so on and so forth? So my project deals with these issues to an extent. Fully autonomy in weapon system, in particular, therefore, those weapon systems that use artificial intelligence then could be cause any problem in the ascription of criminal responsibility to human beings.
I'm wondering whether your research project confirmed the existence of this accountability gap, and in that case, what could be potential solutions for this?
Well, that's a difficult question. One has to read the Journal of International Criminal Justice Special Issues, but however, some of the research associates have already published articles and papers in this respect, and so I can do some spoiler here. Actually, I would like to clarify that when it comes to ascription of criminal responsibility for war crimes that are committed on the battlefield, namely war crimes concerning violations of the international humanitarian law rules on targeting, because, I don't know, civilians are severely hit or there have been disproportionate collateral damage and so on and so forth. Usually it is already difficult to attribute a criminal responsibility to individuals because the rules at stake are quite loose in terms of defining what is a military objective, what proportionality in military attacks means, and so on and so forth. So there is already a problem of accountability gap, I would say, in general, regardless of the kind of weapon that is used. These kind of problems, however, are clearly much bigger when it comes to the use of so-called full autonomous weapon systems, because indeed, as I said, you would have problems in identifying who has carried out the criminal conduct, the machine, the human, and who had the guilty mind, if any, the machine, the human, and so on and so forth. So yes, the research project has identified that the gap exists to a greater extent, depending also on the legal framework that we apply, because in the field of war crimes there is no uniform legal framework. If you look at the rules of the Rome Statute for the International Criminal Court, you might reach a particular result. If you look at other national rules or national practices, perhaps you have different outcomes and so on and so forth. But yes, the gap exists, and the possibility to address it, that's the difficult part. Some have advocated the possibility to make in the future artificial intelligence weapons machine criminally responsible. We tend not to subscribe this view for a variety of reasons, but in the future perhaps this would be something that would occur. I don't know.
Just to clarify, what would it mean to make a machine criminally responsible?
Well, it means that you can deactivate the machine, you can put the machine to do other tasks, and so on and so forth. This is the propositions that have been done in the doctrine, and the examples that are made is the main one is of the criminal responsibility of legal entities, because legal entities, when they are subject to criminal rules in certain legal systems, well, they do not exist as human beings, but they are a fiction, no? Legal fiction. So the parallelism is made with them. I don't think that the parallelism really has any kind of it doesn't make sense to me, but this is made as a proposition. So one possibility could be to insist upon some sort of objective, not criminal responsibility, but objective tort liability on the state that applies and uses these weapon systems, so you don't have to prove that there has been a violation of international humanitarian law, but you can prove that since you use weapons that may be causing these unforeseeable harm, because when they use artificial intelligence and machine learning programs, you don't know how they have reached a particular decision, and the process that has been done is quite mysterious for human beings. So then and therefore there can be unforeseeable consequences in using this technology. Then you can say that states using those machines are objectively liable without the need to prove the violation of international rules. So this could be one solution.
Okay, Thanks very much for this answer. I'm also curious about the potential criminal responsibility of the programmers and developers of these weapons in case crimes are committed. Although they may not be the ones taking the decision of deploying the weapons on the ground, they seem to have a key role in the way the weapons operate. So I'm wondering whether international criminal law allows for establishing the criminal responsibility of these people.
No, that's a very important question. Again, this is a spoiler, because one of the research associates, Dr. Marta Bo, has written on this issue, and she has a quite interesting idea. She will be going to publish her paper very soon, so I hope I'm not revealing anything that is secret. But she underlines correctly, I think, that whenever a programmer has to indeed program such an autonomous weapons using artificial intelligence, it has to make decision. This programmer has to make decision about how the machine has to behave on the battlefield. So it means that it has to incorporate how the machine has to behave in the future whenever it has to face certain situations, and how to has to behave in compliance with international humanitarian law. So these decisions that are human decisions will be incorporated into the machine. And then when the machine will be used, then it will act on the basis of the decisions taken by the human being, perhaps many years before. So in one way, this programmer might have some sort of criminal responsibility for the possible war crimes committed in the future, or under the doctrine of aiding and abetting, or under any other doctrine, depending on whether or not the programmer then continues to work with the machine, including in the battlefield, because these machines that they use artificial intelligence, they will be continue to be fed by data, with data. So it's not that's done once and for all. They need to continue to have an interaction with human beings, and usually they will be all the initial programmer or people doing this job. So in one way you could make a case in some exceptional circumstances of the possible criminal liability of the programmers for war crimes.
Okay. Now I want to tackle a different issue, which is the legal aspect. Some say that such weapons should be banned because the decision to kill a human being should only be taken by another human being. What do you think about this? And also I wanted to ask you to clarify whether international human rights law and international humanitarian law regulate the use of these weapons.
This is a very intriguing question, and indeed I don't know if you know that I've been co-hosting 10 episodes podcast on lethal autonomous weapons with my research associates, and some of the episodes were really dealing with these difficult issues. Well, in this respect, some people would argue that under international humanitarian law there is no express requirement that the targeting decisions or the military attack is being carried out on the basis of a human decision, because what they would say is that international humanitarian law simply regulates the behavior of the belligerents in this respect, and until the decision has been taken in compliance with the relevant rules, the proportionality and the principle of distinction and so on and so forth, it doesn't matter whether or not the decision to fire a particular target has been taken autonomously by a machine on the basis of a software or algorithm, of course, or directly by a human being. And indeed, I must say, I can understand this position, because until now also artificial intelligence has been used perhaps not to make the final decision who to kill, but to support the human decision on who to kill. But I mean, the step is there. I mean, what does it matter if the software tells me that this is a military objective, and then I trust what the software is telling me because I don't have the time to overcome this conclusion, and then I commit, let's say, a mistake. I mean, I was relying upon the technology to make my human decision. It's like when you use Google Maps. sometimes you take the path indicated by Google Map, but without questioning all the time whether or not the Google Map is right or wrong. So the same already happens in wartime. However, for many others, this additional step, namely to leave entirely the machine, to also implement the decision, not only to suggest to the human which decision should be taken, this is a military objective, go and fire, but to also carry out the decision is ethically problematic. Because this would mean that you would relinquish to a machine, indeed, the decision to take the life of a human being, which would therefore be a sort of supremacy of the machine over the human, which is something that many people would consider terribly problematic, including under human rights law, that would therefore bring into the picture the problem of human dignity and respect of human dignity, which means that therefore you can lose your life only upon the decision, if any, of another human being, but not of a machine.
Okay. And you mentioned in the beginning the specific treaty dealing with these weapons. I've heard that attempts to develop a specific treaty is not progressing. So I wanted to ask you whether you think that there is a need to develop such a specific treaty, and why is the development of the treaty not progressing?
Well, certainly I think that the regulation of such weapons is absolutely needed in terms of a ban or in terms of adopting really guiding principles for the development of this technology. We should also underline that those companies, private companies that are developing the necessary technology in this field, they have some resistance. I mean, the campaign for promoting the adoption of a treaty banning fully autonomous weapons comes also from the engineering branch. So they see all the ethical issues in the military application of a technology that of course is very promising in our daily lives, because it's almost the same technology applied in the military field. So they are totally against, in a way, the military applications of this technology. But we have also to consider at the same time that there are some countries where having authoritarian rule, where the relevant engineers are not private companies, but they work for the state, and therefore they wanted to acquire military superiority in this field. I can mention Russia and China, of course. They are the big investors in this technology, and this naturally creates a sort of competition in the field, which would therefore explain why there is such a resistance by the powerful country in adopting a treaty banning or regulating this technology that, when it will be adopted, will give military superiority in the field. So to end this interview, I just wanted to ask you where we can find further information regarding the project and the findings. Yes, some information can be found on our website, which is lawsandwarcrimes.com. In addition, again, as I said before, we have a podcast which is available on all platforms, Spotify, Apple and Amazon Music and so on and so forth, which is called Lethal Autonomous Weapons, 10 Things We Wanted to Know. And this is a series of interviews with experts on these issues, and also on the Graduate Institute website under my personal page. Great. Thank you very much, Professor Gaeta, for this interesting discussion, for your time. Thank you for having me. Thank you. Thanks. And thanks for watching. Thank you.